All right, I'm going to go over a real brief timeline here before I get into Revelation chapter 21. And I'm kind of sad that there's not going to be very many people who watch this video compared to watching a video if I had, have Rapture in the title. This video, though, is so important, and our understanding of the big picture is really important. And God bless those of you who are here and watching, and I hope you're encouraged by what I have to share today. So in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul is talking about the resurrection of the dead. He isn't really talking about the rapture. The rapture isn't a part of this whole 1 Corinthians 15 a resurrection chapter. Paul is talking about the resurrection. That's what he's talking about. He's not talking about a rapture. He's talking about resurrection. And what Paul uses in this resurrection analogy is the harvest imagery of Christ being the first fruits of the resurrection harvest. And then there's another group, those who are his at his coming. Those who are his at his coming, and it includes everybody, all Christians who are going to be resurrected during this time before he actually appears as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And for harvest imagery, there always has to be three parts, which means there has to be gleanings. So who are the gleanings? Well, Paul says, then comes the end. And the end is when Jesus hands the kingdom to his Father. That's over here at the time of the great white throne judgment. Then comes the end, and that's when all the rest of the people who have ever lived, good, bad, whatever, are going to be resurrected, and this is the last day. Okay, a lot of people want to make the last day part of this group of those who belong to Jesus at his coming, and I suppose we can look at it in the sense of during the last days, which is kind of what the last day, when Jesus is talking about that in the Gospel of John, for example, where Martha says, yes, I know that we'll be raised up at the last day. The Jews only knew about this one here. They didn't know anything about resurrections and raptures and all of that. So when we're talking about the end times and you're a Jewish person, this is the last day over here. According to 1 Corinthians 15, we have Christ the first fruits, 2,000 years ago, those who are his at his coming. Okay, and we're talking about resurrections here. We're not talking about raptures. And then comes the end, and that's when everybody will be resurrected. Okay, so let's look at the raptures for believers, and Revelation shows us three groups of raptured people. It's not just one. The church is never raptured. Okay, we have groups of people, various groups that are coming into the heavenly temple, just like priests would rotate into temple during their time of service, which is what the number 24 is all about. It's about groups of people showing up. And so the very first group of believers that are going to show up are represented as sons. Okay, the male child, the child who's caught up to God and to his throne, the child who is going to inherit. We're talking about sons here. We're not talking about a bride. And I've talked about brides before, but what we see is sons being taken. Okay, there is going to be various groups of sons, and I'm speaking about this symbolically the way the Bible does. Sons inherit. Sons are firstborn. Okay, and there can be more than one firstborn. You can be a woman and be the third child in your family and still qualify as a firstborn son, okay, if you're a believer. So there's going to be a rapture and resurrection of God's sons who are kings and priests. They're elders. They assist Christ, and that's what they're going to be doing while they're in heaven. And they'll actually have something that they do too that may not actually be in heaven, but that's not the topic of this particular video. The fifth seal martyrs, they're going to be martyred by the harlot. Remember, the harlot is destroyed right over here at the sixth trumpet, same day as the abomination of desolation. That's the end of World War III right there. And then the 144,000 are going to be raptured as well. Some of them will have died, and they'll be in this group of fifth seal martyrs. The fifth seal martyrs actually receive their white robes in heaven, which means they're resurrected in heaven. They receive their glorified bodies in heaven. Okay, you don't have to be a spirit, come to the earth, get a body, and then go into heaven. You can actually receive a glorified body in heaven. Okay, so we've got the raptured and resurrected kings and priests in heaven. We've got the fifth seal martyrs, of which there's so many you can't count them. They're in heaven. We've got the 144,000 of Israel in heaven. And there still will be believers on earth, okay, after the abomination of desolation. There's going to be people who are Christians who will be beheaded, okay, and they're going to be resurrected over here at the second coming when Christ returns. And there's going to be some who survive. They're alive and remain until the coming of Christ, and they're going to be caught up in the third rapture. That's when Christ comes on a cloud and harvests this last group of wheat, okay? And that's when the fullness of the Gentiles comes in, okay? It isn't until the end of this age. This age ends right here. That's the end of this age. And it's the beginning of the day of the Lord, which, as I've talked about in other videos, is the millennium. Okay? The day of the Lord will come in with the wrath of God. Okay? The sign of the sixth seal will precede it. There'll be silence in heaven as all believers are in heaven, including the spirits and the souls of the people who were martyred by the beast. They're going to be in heaven. Every resurrected believer is going to be in heaven. All believers are going to be in heaven at this time, right here, the third rapture. That's when we reach the end of the age and the beginning of the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord comes like a thief in the night. We don't know when it's going to happen. However, we do know when the second coming of Christ will be. It will be 1,260 days after the abomination of desolation. Okay, so if we have the abomination of desolation right here, we know it's going to be 1,260 days until the second coming. But the wrath of God is going to be poured out in the 7 bowls of wrath before Christ returns right here. We don't know how long the wrath of God is going to last. I have a feeling it's going to be less than 1,230 days. Because we know the tribulation of those days is going to be cut short. The reign of the beast is not cut short. That's going to be a full 42 months. Okay, the time that the remnant of Israel is in the wilderness is not cut short. It's 1,260 days. But the tribulation of those days will be cut short when we reach the end of the age and the beginning of the day of the Lord, or the millennial reign. Okay, it's going to come in with the wrath of God. The tribulation of those days is going to be cut short. We don't know how far into it's going to be cut short, though. But we do know that the beast and the false prophet who are going to be on the scene at this time, and the earth dwellers are going to be saying peace and safety. And when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come on them, and they will not escape. But these people here are not in darkness, and they will know to be awake, okay? And they'll be counting days between the day of the abomination and the second coming. And it may get a little close to the end, okay? The wrath of God may only last 30 days. It may only last 2 weeks. We don't know. But it's going to be pretty far into toward the end of the 42-month reign of the beast, because these guys are going to be thinking peace and safety. It looks like the world is ours. It looks like Jesus isn't going to come back. Everything looks great, and they will start lowering their guard until the day there's this final rapture, and they see the sixth seal sign in heaven, and it's the sign of the Son of Man, and they run to hide, okay? But those demon spirits are going to come out of the mouth of the beast and the false prophet and the dragon, and they're going to lure these people out of their hidey holes and bring them to Armageddon, and that's when Christ will return, and that'll be the end of them. And so that'll be the day when all believers will be resurrected who haven't been resurrected yet. And then when Christ returns, all believers are going to be gathered by the angels from one end of heaven to another. Christ is going to send out these angels to gather all of the elect. Okay, that is people who have already been brought to heaven. They're going to come and be with Christ on the earth. That's the seventh trumpet. Okay, that's when the end of, what people call the tribulation is. But actually, the tribulation of those days is cut short by the beginning of the wrath of God, which is part of the day of the Lord or the millennium. So this is a more clear understanding that I've gotten about the this part of the timeline since I've been studying Revelation 20, 21, and 22. Okay, during the day of the Lord, believers are going to be kind of in two groups. There's going to be a group that is priests to God in heaven. That's fifth seal martyrs. And then there's going to be those who are kings and priests. If they're kings, they're going to rule with Christ on the earth for this 1,000 years. Okay. The people who are resurrected, who aren't kings and priests, I'm not sure what they're going to do. They may be in heaven as well, acting as priests or worshipers, but they're not ruling and reigning. During this 1,000-year reign of Christ, believers are going to be holy. Okay. What that means is we're not going to have a sin nature. We're not going to be sinful. We're going to be holy. We're going to have glorified bodies. We're not going to be able to die or to, fall away from the Lord. We're going to be holy and righteous. Okay, this is part of what Christ has granted us, is not only to have our sins forgiven through his blood, and those who receive him become part of his called group who have the opportunity to be a part of this larger group, the ecclesia, the called out and two people of God, ultimately to be the bride of Christ. Okay, you'll notice in the book of Revelation there is no symbolism for the bride here. Okay, we've talked about the bride before. She shows up in Revelation 19. We know that she is going to be wearing bright and beautiful garments. And the scriptures tell us that these garments represent the righteous deeds of the saints. Before we're saved, there's nothing righteous or good that we do. But the Bible attributes righteous deeds to the saints after the millennium. That is the only time that we'll be doing things that are righteous and good, that God accounts them to us as being righteous deeds. So during the millennium, we'll be holy and righteous. That's the plan. God's plan is that we would be holy and righteous and sanctified. So during this time, we're going to be doing holy and righteous deeds. And finally, we'll appear wearing our righteous garments. That is at the end. Okay, that's when the bride appears. That's also when the holy city, the New Jerusalem, appears. Okay, so the bride is going to be ready, and the holy city is going to be ready. There's going to be a new earth, and there's going to be new heavens. The people who came out of the tribulation and came out of the millennium, who have their names written in the Lamb's Book of Life, they're going to be the guests that will be invited to come to the holy city. And there's going to be other people too who will have their names written in the Lamb's Book of Life from the foundation of the world. We don't know who they are. They're people who aren't a part of the church, but for whatever reason, God wanted to save them. Okay, and they will be saved when their names are found in the Lamb's Book of Life. And they will live on the new earth, and they're going to be guests. The other thing we find out is that God is not going to be living in heaven anymore. God is going to be living on the earth. The tabernacle of God, or the dwelling place of God, is with men here. And so the Father's house and the bride's house are going to be ready at the same time, that the guests have a new place to live. Everyone wicked and evil and rebellious is going to be in the lake of fire. Everything is going to be made ready. During this day of God, okay, this is the day of the Lord. Peter calls this 1,000 years the day of the Lord. And then he calls the time that's after the earth and the heavens pass away. This is the day of God. And this is when the bride will be ready, the new Jerusalem will be ready, the new heavens and the earth will be ready, the guests will be ready, and God is going to come to live on the new earth in the new Jerusalem. Okay, that is how the timeline goes. This present age will end on an undisclosed date. We don't know when, but it will end at the time that the wrath of God begins. The wrath of God begins the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord lasts 1,000 years. Satan will be bound for 1,000 years. We don't know if the 1,000 years will coincide exactly with the millennial reign of Christ, but they'll be fairly close. And then he'll be released after 1,000 years. Not necessarily the 1,000-year reign of Christ, but after he's been bound for 1,000 years, he'll be released for a little while, and that's when all the rebels who've sort of, come to the surface are going to be part of that end-time Gog-Magog war, and then they'll all be destroyed, and that's when everything is new, okay? That's what we're waiting for. The climax of the book of Revelation is the appearance of the bride and the new Jerusalem, okay? Revelation 21 is the big, I don't want to say it's the finale. It's not the finale, but it is the moment that we've all been waiting for. It's like when there's a wedding and you have all the bridesmaids coming, and finally there's the bride, okay? The groom is ready. He's got a house ready, and finally here comes the bride. And that's when everything becomes new. So let's take a look at Revelation 21. Jesus has a place that he said he's preparing for us. That place is the New Jerusalem. And in John 14:2-3, we read about Jesus telling his disciples that he was going to go away and prepare a place for them. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. So he's going to come and take us to be with him. But the place, the Father's house, is still waiting for its final preparations, the final touches, and it won't be until the end, after the great white throne judgment, that the New Jerusalem comes down. Revelation 21:1-2. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And remember, the sea is a symbol for death in the book of Revelation. Okay, that's one of the meanings for it. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. When this day comes, the sea will be no more. Death and Hades, we know, will have already been cast into the lake of fire. Satan will be in the lake of fire. All the rebels will be in the lake of fire. And it's going to be the dawning of a new day. Verse 3, and I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. In Revelation chapter 1, there's a verse that's really easy to gloss over. Verse 4, John, to the 7 churches that are in Asia, grace to you and peace from him who is, and who was, and who is to come, and from the 7 spirits who are before his throne, and from Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, and ruler of kings on earth. Okay, so this is a greeting, and it's from the 7 spirits, which is the Holy Spirit. It's from Jesus, the faithful witness, and it's from him who is, who was, and who is to come. Okay, this is a way of saying that God is eternal, but this is also a way of telling us that the Father is coming to the earth. Okay, the dwelling place of God is with men. And he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning or crying or pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. So even during the day of the Lord, the millennial reign of Christ, people will still die. There will still be sickness that will come on people. There will still be sadness and mourning. It won't be until this point in time, when the day of God arrives and the new heavens and the new earth come, that everything that's sad, sorrowful, painful, the former things are going to go away. They're going to be gone forever. The New Jerusalem is going to be a place that's fit for a king, and that's because God himself is going to live there, and he is the king of the universe. His home is going to be our home. It's the Father's house. Okay, we're going to live with the Father in the Father's house, along with Jesus, the Lamb. And we're going to be living in the New Jerusalem on a new earth, along with redeemed men and women. There's a voice from the throne, most likely that of the Lamb, who announces that God's home is now on the earth with his people forever. And that was the plan. That was the plan when God made Adam, that he would be dwelling with Adam, that Adam and Eve and the people on the earth, that he would be able to be with them. That was the goal. The plan never changed. It actually expanded and became much, much bigger and even more glorious. God will finally have a permanent home, and his home is going to be with us. Verse 5, and he who is seated on the throne said, behold, I am making all things new. We don't know exactly what new things God has in store for us, or how the things that he's made are going to become new, or what form all those new things are going to take. And we're so used to death and sin and corruption that it's really hard for us to imagine what our earth would be like without any death, without any sin, without any pain, without any corruption, without any trials. Sin and sadness touch everything in our life right now. So much so that the presence of those things actually seems normal to most of us. Imagine when these things are no longer a part of our lives anymore. Now, during the day of the Lord, during the millennium, we are not going to have a sin nature, we as believers, but the people on the earth will. We're not going to die, but there will be people on earth who will die. Okay, we're not going to be sad. We may get frustrated if people on the earth aren't paying attention to what Jesus is saying, but the downward pull that we experience right now will not be a part of our experience while we are living during the millennium. Also, he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. So there's a voice from the throne, probably the voice of the Lamb, that declares that God's going to make his home with men. And he also specifically told John to write this down. Write this down. Write this down. Okay? These words are trustworthy and true. The New Jerusalem coming down from heaven and God making his home with us is as much a part of the revelation that God gave Jesus to show his servants what was going to happen as everything else that we read here. It's as real as the seals and the trumpets and the bowls and the elders and all of that. This part is a big part of the story. And so the voice said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And remember, God gave this revelation to Jesus to show to his servants those things which must quickly come to pass. And that includes what we see over here as part of the new heavens and the new earth. Several times over the course of the book of Revelation, someone is going to state that their testimony is true and that what they're saying is trustworthy and that they have told the story just like they have received it. So this is what John said. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his servants the things which must soon take place. And he made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw. So everything John saw, he wrote it down. And then the angel also bears witness that what he shared to John was true. Then the angel told me to write, "Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb." And he said to me, "These are the true words of God." Revelation 19:9. And the Lamb, that is Jesus, also testified that what he's sharing is true, that God told him these things and that he was sharing exactly what God had showed him. Revelation 21:5. And the one seated on the throne said, "Behold, I make all things new." And then he said, "Write this down, for these words are faithful and true." Revelation 22:6. And then he said to me, "These words are trustworthy and true. And the Lord, the God of the spirits of the prophets, has sent his angel to show his servants what must soon take place." And Revelation 22:16. "I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you about these things for the churches." Revelation 22:20. "He who testifies to these things says, 'Surely I am coming soon.'" Over and over again, we read that Jesus, the angel, and John all bear witness that what they are sharing is the truth about the mystery of God that was revealed to them. Verse 6. And he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment. And the one who conquers will have this heritage. I will be his God, and he will be my son." Okay, this is a very interesting passage that I think I didn't really understand until just recently. Immediately after the great white throne judgment has taken place and everything, it has sort of been wrapped up and everyone's eternal destiny has been sealed, Jesus, as the Alpha and the Omega, the one who is the beginning and the end, along with his Father, who's also the beginning and the end, will declare that it's finished. Okay, after the great white throne judgment, everything is finished. He says, "It is done." That is, everything that's related to this present world will have been brought to its final culmination, and all judgment will have been meted out, and everyone and everything judged and or rewarded. Okay? But in verse 7, we seem to be introduced to a new group of people. "The one who conquers will have this heritage, and I will be his God, and he will be my son." The heritage is the ability to have access or to receive from the spring of the water of life and be called God's son. Okay, we know that we're already sons over here, okay, and that once the New Jerusalem comes down and everything is finished, we're no longer sons. Now all the sons have been built into this one entity called the bride. All these groups of people as living stones will finally be built into the holy temple, which will actually be put together or assembled in heaven, okay, or in glory. The stones are finished at the quarry, but the assembling does not happen until they're actually in the place, okay, where the temple is going to be. So, for instance, Solomon's temple, all the stones were finished at the quarry. They weren't brought to the temple site and then finished at the temple site. They were finished at the quarry, and then the finished stones were just slid into place when they went into Solomon's temple, so that there wasn't the sound of a hammer or chisel. Okay, there wasn't any perfection that had to happen to those stones. The perfection had already been given to the stone at the quarry. The same thing is true for us as living stones. We're being finished in the quarry, which is the earth right now. We're going to be hammered and chiseled and fine-tuned and all of that, so that when we're finally brought to heaven, we're going to be just set into place. There isn't any perfection that has to be given to us, because we will already have that holiness. And that temple, that heavenly temple that God is going to live in, the temple of believers, is going to be assembled in heaven and then come down as the New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem and the bride are one unit. Okay, so we're not looking at believers as being sons anymore. They're the bride with the New Jerusalem. But God has this other group now. They're sons who have a heritage. They're going to drink from the springs of water. And he says here, I will be his God and he will be my son. These are people who conquer. Well, these aren't us. Any believer will have already conquered over here on this side of the second coming of Christ. Either conquered by not taking the name and number and mark of the beast, or having conquered by not have, slidden into harlot stuff over here, defiled themselves with women. Okay, and we're talking about the harlot of Revelation and her daughters and Jezebel. Those are the women that people over here are not to defile themselves with. And that really includes us as believers right now. We need to conquer in that sense too, that we are faithful to God and true to his son Jesus. You know, during the time of the millennial reign, when Satan is bound, people will still have a sin nature, and they'll be able to choose whether or not they want to follow Jesus or they don't. They're going to be forced to follow him during the millennium, because Christ is going to rule with a rod of iron. But that doesn't mean that they aren't going to want to rebel. And just like children who have to obey you no matter what, doesn't mean that they actually want to. They're going to, be resisting discipline. And the same thing is true during the millennium of the people who are living on the earth. Not everybody is going to want to follow Jesus. And so when Satan is finally released for that little while, people will be able to come to the surface. The rebels, those who don't want to follow Jesus. And the Bible tells us they're going to be as numerous as the sand of the sea. There's going to be so many of them. So many people will, after Satan is released, they're going to be a part of this new Gog-Magog coalition alliance. They're going to follow after this guy, this new leader that shows up, this Gog guy. It's not the first Gog-Magog war, which is going to take place over here. The one where weapons are burned for 7 years. Okay, once you get into the new heavens and the new earth, there aren't going to be weapons being burned for 7 years. That isn't going to happen. So this is a symbolic Gog-Magog war. It's a new alliance that's going to form, and people are going to have to choose again. Do they want to follow Jesus in the new heavens and the new earth, or do they want to follow Satan and take their lot with the deception and whatever that's going on at that time? The people who conquer, that is, the ones who do not follow Satan, and I think they're going to be in the minority, actually, because we learned that the ones who follow Satan and this new Gog-Magog thing are as numerous as the sand of the sea. It may be that most of the people who come to the end of the millennium will be rebels against Christ. There are going to be those, though, who don't rebel at this final rebellion. And I believe that that's who's being talked about here. Those who conquer will have this heritage. I will be his God, and he will be my son. So during the new heavens and the new earth, the day of God, there's going to be a bride that will belong to Christ, and God is going to have sons. He's going to have sons. Right now, we're his sons, but one day we're going to be a part of the bride. But there's going to be other sons, okay, that God is going to have. And I believe that they are going to be the ones who come out of this rebellion right here. The one who conquers will have this heritage. I will be his God, and he will be my son. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, and for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake of fire that burns with sulfur, which is the second death. And so those rebels that are right here when the great white throne happens, they will be put into the lake of fire. And that's this list right here. They're the cowardly, the faithless, detestable, murderers. I mean, this is stuff that's going to be happening, okay, when Satan is released for the little while. People are just going to go crazy because they can. And when this day happens, the great white throne judgment, all those people are going to be cast into the lake of fire. We already know that the beast and the false prophet are going to be cast into the lake of fire. Okay, that happens way back here. And it's after this transition passage where we learn that the rebels over here are going to go into the lake of fire. John is invited to see the bride, the wife of the Lamb. Then came one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues, and he spoke to me, saying, "Come, I'm going to show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." And what follows is actually a description of the New Jerusalem, her gates and her walls and the foundations and the building materials and the dimensions. And this seems to be very incongruous, as John was just told he was going to see the bride, okay, the wife of the Lamb, but instead he's going to be shown a city. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great high mountain and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. Its radiance like a most rare jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal. And it had a great high wall with 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and on the gates the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel were inscribed. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Now you have to remember that cities are built. Okay, that's this word, banah. Okay, so cities are built, and remember, Adam's wife was built. Okay, she was constructed. It's the same word. Cities are built, like Babel was built, using this word, banah, and the woman was built, banah. Temples are built, banah, same word. Jesus said he would build his church. And Paul said that the church was built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets. And Christ Jesus is the cornerstone. So in Revelation, a city is connected with a woman. Okay, in this case, the bride is connected with the New Jerusalem. Earlier in Revelation, we saw that the harlot was connected with Babel or Babylon, which was a man-made city. This is a city that comes down from God, and the harlot is a man-made city where people said, let us make bricks, okay, and make us build a city and a tower. The holy city which John sees coming down from heaven is a reflection of the beauty and glory of the bride. And whereas the attributes of the harlot were the same attributes that were found in Babylon, so too the attributes of the bride are going to be reflected in the holy city. The harlot's beauty was a carnal display of worldly wealth and power and riches, and the bride and her city will be a display of beauty wrought in heaven, coming through fire, tested as gold and precious stones. The body of Christ is also compared to a temple that's built of living stones, established on the foundation of the apostles. The holy city is also built on a foundation of the apostles, with the names of the 12 apostles written on the 12 foundations of the New Jerusalem. The 4 great high walls are present, not to protect the inhabitants of the city from danger, but to separate the home of the bride from the dwelling place of people who are going to live on the earth. And the city also has 12 gates, each made of a single pearl. Verse 15, and the one who spoke with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city and its gates and its walls. Okay, remember that John was given a reed to measure the earthly temple that was going to be on the earth in Revelation 11. This is the temple of God in the holy city. Okay, this is an actual temple that can be measured. An angel has a golden measuring rod, which is a gold speaks of heaven. This angel measures the city and its gates and its walls. And the city lies 4 square. That is, its length is the same as its width. And he measured the city with his rod, 12,000 stadia. Its length and width and height are equal, okay? And the same is true for the Holy of Holies that was in the temple. It was a cube, okay? Height, width, length, all the same. And he also measured its wall, 144 cubits by human measure, which is also an angel's measurement. So that number 144 is also showing up again. We saw it over here, referring to the 144,000 of Israel. The wall is built of jasper, while the city was pure gold, like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with every kind of jewel. First was jasper, the second sapphire, the third agate, the fourth emerald, the fifth onyx, the sixth carnelian, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the 10th chrysoprase, jacinth, the 12th amethyst. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each of the gates made of a single pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. The city will be extremely large, and its architecture will be in the form of a giant cube, the same as the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle or the temple. The city is 12,000 stadia in each direction. The number 12 is associated with the number of divine government. It's also the number of people who are chosen. 12 tribes, 12 apostles, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes who come to Christ during the time of the end. Verse 22, and I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb. I'm going to quit right here, and we'll pick this up in another video because I want to talk about this temple, tabernacle, New Jerusalem, and I do want to spend a little time on it, so I don't want to just rush through it. And I think I've given you plenty of food for thought and grist for the mill in what I've shared with you so far. Leave a comment in the comment section. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up, and share this video if you feel so led to do so. Till the next video, I pray you'll have a very, very blessed day.